I stared at my phone on Christmas Eve, watching my son Jason pop champagne at my own beach house. To the future owner, he shouted, toasting to my death while I sat alone in my Greenwich mansion. This wasn't just this year. This was every single holiday for the past decade, planning my funeral while I was still breathing. My name is Eleanor, I'm 72, and I did something that shocked even myself. Mom, we're snowed in, can't make it tonight. That's what the text said. But Instagram told a different story. There they were, my entire family celebrating Christmas at my Hamptons house, 3 miles from where I was eating dinner alone, again. But this time, I didn't cry. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Sell everything, Michael. Tonight, I'm disappearing, and I'm taking every penny with me. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I have a feeling I'm not the only mother who's been treated like a bank account instead of a person. What my children didn't know was that I had been listening to their conversations. The conservatorship papers, the nursing home plans, the inheritance timeline. They thought they were planning my future. I was planning my escape. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. Eleanor Vance adjusted the grandmother's silver fork for the 3rd time. Her arthritic fingers moved slowly, each joint protesting against the December cold that seeped through the tall windows. The pain was familiar now. Like an old friend who visited without invitation. The fork caught the afternoon light. Sterling silver, passed down through 4 generations of women who had known their place at the head of the table. Women who had never questioned whether their children would come home for Christmas. Eleanor's reflection wavered in the polished surface. 72 years old, still setting places for people who might not show. The dining room stretched before her like a cathedral. 20-foot ceilings, oil paintings of ancestors whose names she sometimes forgot. The mahogany table could seat 12, but she had only set 3 places. Her chair at the head. Jason's to her right, Camilla's to her left. The same arrangement since David died 8 years ago. She walked to Jason's place setting. Her son, 42 now, with his father's strong jaw and his mother's stubborn streak. The little boy who used to climb into her lap during thunderstorms had grown into a man who called twice a month. Usually when his hedge fund needed money. The crystal water glass sat perfectly aligned with the dinner plate. Eleanor had learned to set a proper table from her own mother. Details matter, darling. They show respect. She adjusted the angle of the bread plate. A 1/4 inch to the left. There. Camilla's place looked different somehow. Her daughter preferred wine to water. Always had, even as a teenager, sneaking sips from dinner parties. 39 now, married to that investment banker who wore his wealth like cologne. Too strong. Too obvious. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 4 times. They would arrive at 6. Jason had texted this morning, looking forward to tonight, Mom. Cam's bringing the kids. The grandchildren. 8-year-old Sophie with David's blue eyes. 6-year-old Marcus who still hugged her without being asked. Eleanor walked to the kitchen. The roast beef sat in the warming drawer, perfectly medium rare. David's favorite. She had cooked it the same way for 40 years. Some traditions were worth keeping. Others, she was beginning to question. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text message. Eleanor picked it up with both hands. Her fingers weren't as steady as they used to be. Snowed in. Can't make it. Love you, Mom. Jason. She stared at the screen. Read it twice. Then a 3rd time. The words didn't change. She walked to the window above the sink. No snow. Just December drizzle painting the world gray. Connecticut in winter looked tired. Like everything else in her life. Another buzz. This time from Camilla, so sorry. Roads are horrible. Rain out here too. Next week for sure. Rain, not snow. Eleanor set the phone down carefully. Her reflection stared back from the dark window. Silver hair perfectly styled, lipstick still fresh, dressed for a party that wasn't happening. She opened Instagram. Camilla's profile appeared first. Her daughter had posted 20 minutes ago. A story with a location tag, Hamptons getaway with the fam. Inheritance vibes family time. The Hamptons. Eleanor's own beach house. The one she had bought 30 years ago when David's firm went public. She scrolled through the photos. Camilla in the living room, wine glass raised. Jason on the deck, opening champagne. Sophie and Marcus building sandcastles on the private beach. Her beach, her house, her champagne. The video played automatically. Jason's voice, loud and cheerful, to the future owner. The camera panned to show the ocean view. The same view Eleanor had watched 1,000 sunrises from. Alone. She set the phone down. Her hands trembled, but not from arthritis this time. The roast beef would go uneaten. The wine would stay corked. The table she had spent 2 hours setting would remain untouched. Eleanor walked back to the dining room. The three-place settings looked like graves now. Monuments to expectations that would never be met. She reached for her Medicare card from her purse on the sideboard. Red, white, and blue plastic. A reminder of her age, her mortality, her expendability. She placed it next to her dinner plate. The card sat there like an accusation. A countdown timer her children could see ticking away. Not waiting for her to join them. Waiting for her to leave. The candles flickered in their silver holders. 12 of them, burning for no one. Eleanor had lit them at 5 o'clock, the way her mother taught her. Candles make everything special, darling. But there was nothing special about eating alone on Christmas Eve. She blew out the first candle. Then the second. The smoke rose in thin streams, carrying away the illusion that this dinner mattered. That she mattered. One by one, the flames disappeared. The room grew darker with each breath. The last candle fought the longest. Its flame danced, trying to survive. Eleanor hesitated. Once it was gone, the pretense would be over. She would have to face the truth that had been growing in the shadows for years. She blew it out. Darkness swallowed the dining room. The grandfather clock chimed 6 times. Dinner time. Christmas Eve. The silence pressed against her eardrums like deep water. Louder than any argument could ever be. Heavier than any words they might have spoken. Eleanor stood in the darkness, still wearing her pearls, still holding her breath. Outside, the December rain tapped against the windows like fingers asking to come in. But the emptiness was already inside. It had been living here for years, setting its own place at her table. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tonight was just another Tuesday. The difference was smaller than she had ever imagined. December 26th arrived without fanfare. Eleanor woke at dawn, the same time she had for 40 years. But today felt different. The silence in the house wasn't waiting anymore. It was decided. She made coffee in the kitchen that could feed a restaurant. Single serve. Black. No sugar. The habits of marriage died hard, but they did die eventually. The morning light filtered through windows that needed cleaning. She made a mental note, then erased it. Someone else's problem now. Eleanor walked to her study and pulled Michael Chen's business card from her desk drawer. 23 years as her lawyer. Harvard Law. Discreet. Expensive. She dialed his home number. Eleanor? It's Boxing Day morning. His voice carried the weight of sleep and surprise. Execute Plan B, Michael. Everything we discussed last spring. A pause. Papers shuffling on his end. The liquidation plan? Eleanor, we talked about this as a theoretical exercise. The tax implications alone. I don't care about taxes. I care about freedom. This is about Christmas dinner, isn't it? Eleanor, families fight. It doesn't mean. She cut him off. They weren't fighting, Michael. They were planning. There's a difference. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Michael sighed into the phone. The Greenwich house? Sold. To the highest bidder. Cash only. I want the wire transfer completed by New Year's Eve. The art collection? Auction it. Sotheby's can handle the pieces. The rest goes to estate sale companies. Your jewelry? Eleanor touched the pearls around her neck. David had given them to her on their 10th anniversary. The sentimental pieces come with me. The rest gets liquidated. Eleanor, this is $15 million in assets. Maybe more. If you're having doubts about Jason and Camilla, we can restructure the trust. Create safeguards. She walked to the dining room. The table still held the remnants of last night's setup. 3 plates. 3 glasses. 3 portions of hope that had spoiled overnight. Michael, I've been thinking about this for months. Yesterday just made it official. She picked up her Medicare card from beside her untouched plate. Red, white, blue. A finish line her children were eager to see crossed. Where will you go? Somewhere they'll never think to look. Eleanor hung up and walked upstairs to her bedroom. The walls held 40 years of family photos. Jason's graduation from Wharton. Camilla's wedding in the Hamptons. Christmas mornings when the children still believed in magic. She took down one photo. David holding baby Jason. The rest could stay for the new owners. In her bathroom, she opened the medicine cabinet. 7 prescriptions lined up like soldiers. Blood pressure medication, arthritis pills, calcium supplements, the pharmacy of aging. She dumped them all into a Ziploc bag. The pill organizer went into the trash with a satisfying thud. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jason, "Hope you're not mad about last night." Weather was crazy. Rain's not safe to drive in. Eleanor looked out her bedroom window. The driveway was bone dry. She deleted the message without responding. By noon, 3 black SUVs had arrived. Estate liquidation specialists from the city. They moved through her house like antibodies, cataloging everything that had value. Crystal, silver, paintings David had collected before his taste improved. They worked with the efficiency of people who understood that grief had a price per pound. Eleanor watched them box her life from the kitchen window. A woman with a tablet photographed David's desk. A man in white gloves wrapped her china in newspaper. They were professional, respectful, more respectful than her own children had been. The doorbell rang. A courier with papers from Michael's office. Sale contracts, transfer agreements, tax forms that would make April interesting. She signed each one without reading. Details mattered less than destination. Her phone rang. Camilla's photo appeared on the screen. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, David's determination in her eyes. Eleanor let it go to voicemail. The message played automatically. "Mom, hi, it's me. Jason told me you're selling the house? That can't be right. Call me back. We need to talk about this. About your mental state. This isn't like you. Mental state." The phrase hung in the air like smoke from last night's candles. Eleanor deleted the voicemail and blocked Camilla's number. By 3 o'clock, the estimate was complete. $14.7 million for the house. Another $2 million for the contents. Cash buyers were already interested. Tech money from California. They wouldn't blink at the price if they could close fast. Eleanor accepted an offer from a 30-year-old software engineer. $16 million total. 20% below market value, but he could wire the money within 48 hours. Speed was worth the discount. She walked through rooms that no longer belonged to her. The living room where she had hosted bridge club for 20 years. The library where David had taught Jason to play chess. The sunroom where Camilla had announced her engagement. Ghosts lived in every corner, but they weren't her ghosts anymore. The movers arrived at 4. Eleanor had given them specific instructions. Pack only what fit in the back of a pickup truck. Clothes, personal documents, David's wedding ring. Everything else stayed with the house. She found empty boxes in the garage. Hermes, Chanel, Tiffany, gift boxes from birthdays and holidays past. Boxes that had once held promises. She stacked them in the living room, one on top of another. A pyramid of expensive cardboard. A monument to their expectations. The house felt different with the boxes gone. Lighter, like a bird learning it could fly. Eleanor walked from room to room, saying goodbye to corners that had held her secrets. The kitchen where she had cried over burnt dinners. The study where she had balanced checkbooks and dreams. At sunset, she placed her house keys on top of the pyramid. Brass against cardboard. The weight of 40 years reduced to metal and memories. Tomorrow, someone else would use these keys. Someone else would decide which lights to leave on. Eleanor picked up her suitcase and walked to the front door. She didn't look back. Some chapters ended with fireworks. Others ended with the soft click of a closing door. Outside, her pickup truck waited. A blue Ford she had bought in cash from a dealer in Stamford. The elderly salesman hadn't asked questions when she paid with hundreds. Cash talked. Everything else whispered. She drove away from Greenwich as the streetlights came on. In her rearview mirror, the house grew smaller until it disappeared behind winter trees. Somewhere in the Hamptons, her children were probably opening another bottle of champagne. Toasting their future. Their inheritance. They would learn soon enough that futures weren't guaranteed. Inheritance was just another word for assumption. Eleanor Vance was done assuming. She was finally ready to live. 7 weeks later, Jason's Porsche pulled into what used to be his mother's driveway. February had turned Greenwich gray and brittle. The kind of cold that made expensive cars feel fragile. His hedge fund was hemorrhaging money. Tech stocks had crashed harder than anyone predicted. His biggest clients were asking questions he couldn't answer. The bridge loan from his mother was supposed to fix everything. $15 million in liquidity would keep the fund afloat until the market recovered. Jason straightened his Armani coat and walked to the front door. He had called ahead, but Eleanor never answered her phone anymore. Probably napping. Old people napped a lot. He punched in the security code 0812. His birthday, August 12th. The lock beeped red. Access denied. Jason tried again. Slower this time. 0812. Still red. Maybe she had changed it to Camilla's birthday. Or David's. He tried 6 combinations. All red. The doorbell echoed inside the house. No answer. He knocked harder. Mom, it's Jason. His voice bounced off windows that looked too clean. Too empty. Footsteps approached from inside. Heavy boots, not his mother's careful steps. The door opened to reveal a young man in a Stanford hoodie. Early 30s. Beard. Expensive sneakers. Can I help you? Jason stared. Where's my mother? Where's Eleanor Vance? The man shrugged. I bought this place 6 weeks ago. Previous owner had already moved out. Didn't say where she was going. The words hit like ice water. Jason's throat closed. Bought? You bought this house? Yeah, man. Got a good deal too. The seller was motivated. The young man studied Jason's pale face. You okay? You look like you're gonna throw up. Who handled the sale? Some law firm in the city. Chen and Associates. Look, I don't know what this is about, but if you're not leaving, I'm calling the police. The door closed with a soft click. Jason stood on the porch where he had posed for prom photos. Where he had brought girlfriends to meet his parents. Where he had always assumed he would inherit millions. He fumbled for his phone. Called Camilla. She answered on the first ring. Jason? Did you get the money? Mom's gone. Silence. Then, gone where? I don't know. The house is sold. Some tech guy bought it. Chen and Associates handled it. Camilla's breathing changed. Faster. Sharper. That's impossible. Mom would never sell without telling us. She did. Jason walked back to his car. The Porsche felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Cam, what if she's having mental problems? Early dementia? That could explain the erratic behavior. Or she found out. Found out what? About us talking to that lawyer last year. The conservatorship consultation. Jason's stomach dropped. They had met with a probate attorney in November. Hypothetical questions about elderly parents who made poor financial decisions. How to protect family assets when competency became questionable. The lawyer had explained the process. Medical evaluations, court hearings, temporary guardianship until permanent arrangements could be made. She couldn't have found out. We were careful, were we? Camilla's voice was thin. Jason, if she liquidated everything. She didn't liquidate everything. She's 72. She doesn't understand markets. This is probably about grief. Women her age do crazy things when they're mourning. Jason started the Porsche. The engine sounded expensive but felt hollow. Like everything else in his life lately. He drove around Greenwich for an hour, past houses where his mother's friends lived. Past the country club where she played bridge. Past the cemetery where his father was buried. No sign of her. No clues about where she might have gone. The wind picked up as he returned to the house that was no longer his mother's. Something white caught his eye near the gate. Paper. He parked and walked over. A shredded document lay scattered in the winter grass. Jason knelt and gathered the pieces. Legal letterhead. Fragments of his mother's name. A date from 10 years ago. Part of an old will. He fit the pieces together on his car's hood. Most of the text was missing, but he could make out key phrases, to my beloved children Jason and Camilla. In the event of my death. Primary beneficiaries. The date made him pause. This will was from before his father died. Before the family dynamics shifted. Before money became the language they used instead of love. His phone buzzed. A text from his biggest client, need to discuss the Q4 losses. Not happy with fund performance. Considering withdrawal. Jason looked at the shredded will. At the house that no longer knew his name. At the driveway where he had learned to drive his first car. The Porsche suddenly felt ridiculous. A prop in a play that had ended without him noticing. He called Camilla back. Did you find anything? She planned this. The will fragments are from years ago. She knew we would come looking. What do we do? Jason kicked a piece of the will into the wind. It tumbled across the lawn like an autumn leaf. We find her. And then? We remind her who her children are. But as he drove away from Greenwich, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that his mother already knew exactly who her children were. That was the problem. The February sky was the color of old steel. In his rearview mirror, the house disappeared behind bare trees. For the first time in his life, Jason felt like an orphan. 3,000 miles west, Eleanor Vance no longer existed. She had become Ellie Miller. The name was simpler, easier to carry. Like the pickup truck she drove down Montana's Highway 2, windows down despite the March chill. The air tasted different here. Thinner, cleaner, free of expectations. The ranch sat on 40 acres outside Kalispell. Nothing fancy. A farmhouse that needed paint and a barn that leaned slightly to the left. But the mountains rose around it like cathedral walls, and the silence was the kind that healed instead of accused. Ellie parked near the front porch and listened. Wind through pine trees, a hawk circling overhead, no traffic, no phones ringing, no voices asking for money she no longer owed them. Sam Patterson emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. 68 years old, with the kind of face that belonged on a Marlboro billboard. 30 years of ranching had carved lines around his eyes that spoke of honest work and hard weather. Morning, Ellie. Coffee's fresh if you want some. She had hired Sam to teach her the ranch business. Feed schedules, fence repair, how to read the sky for weather. He accepted her story without question. Widow from back east, starting over, paying cash. In Montana, people respected privacy like a religion. Thanks, Sam. How are our guests this morning? Their guests were 12 rescue dogs. German shepherds, golden retrievers, mixed breeds that had been abandoned or abused. Ellie had found the rescue organization online. Dogs that needed space, quiet, time to remember how to trust. She understood the feeling. The largest dog, a German shepherd named Duke, limped over to greet her. His left hind leg had been broken by his previous owner. Badly healed, but functional. Like most of them, he carried his damage quietly. Ellie scratched behind his ears. Good boy, Duke. Did you sleep okay? Duke's tail wagged once. Progress. 2 months ago, he had cowered when she approached. Trust was earned in small increments here. Daily consistency. No sudden movements. No broken promises. Inside the farmhouse, Sam had bacon frying and eggs warming in the skillet. Simple food. Real food. Nothing that required a sous chef or came with pedigree papers. Bank called yesterday, Sam said, not looking up from the stove. Wire transfer went through fine. Dog food suppliers got paid. Vet bills are current. Ellie nodded. She kept her money in 3 different banks now. Small amounts. Under different names. The lawyers had helped her establish the new identities. Legal, but invisible. In America, you could disappear if you had enough cash and the right paperwork. Any word from the feed store? Delivery Thursday. You want the premium kibble again? These dogs have been through enough. They deserve the good stuff. Sam smiled. It was his first real smile in the 3 months she had known him. Most folks around here buy the cheapest they can find. I'm not most folks. After breakfast, Sam taught her how to chop wood. The axe was heavier than it looked. Her first swing barely chipped the log. Her second missed entirely. Anger won't help, Sam said quietly. Wood doesn't care how mad you are. It only responds to technique. Ellie tried again. This time, she focused on the grain of the wood. The natural weak points. Where the tree wanted to split. The axe bit deep and clean. The log fell in 2 pieces. Better. You're learning to work with things instead of against them. She spent the morning splitting logs for the fireplace. Her hands blistered. Her shoulders ached. But the pile of split wood grew steadily. Tangible progress. Something she could measure and touch. At noon, she drove into town for supplies. Kalispell was the kind of place where people still held doors open and meant it when they asked how you were doing. The hardware store clerk called her ma'am. The bank teller commented on the weather. Normal human interactions without ulterior motives. In the grocery store, she overheard 2 women discussing their children. College expenses, job markets, the same worries she had once shared. But their voices carried love instead of calculation. Concern instead of resentment. Ellie bought dog food and fresh vegetables. Simple meals. No truffle oil or imported cheese. Food that filled you up instead of impressing dinner guests who might not show. On the drive back to the ranch, her phone buzzed. A Connecticut area code. Jason's number. She let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening. Whatever he wanted, she had already given enough. The dogs greeted her return with cautious enthusiasm. Duke even wagged his tail when she approached. Progress. They had learned that she kept her promises. Food at 6. Fresh water always available. No raised voices. No sudden departures. That evening, she sat on the front porch with a glass of wine. Not the expensive Bordeaux from her Greenwich cellar, but a decent Cabernet from a Montana winery. It tasted like earth and honest work. Sam joined her, carrying his own glass. They watched the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. The silence between them was comfortable. No need to fill every moment with conversation. You ever regret it? Sam asked eventually. Regret what? Leaving everything behind. Ellie considered the question. Somewhere in Connecticut, Jason was probably panicking about his hedge fund. Camilla was likely calculating the value of assets that no longer existed. They were still living in the world of balance sheets and quarterly reports. I regret waiting so long, she said finally. A coyote howled in the distance. Duke lifted his head but didn't bark. He was learning to distinguish between real threats and echoes. Ellie understood that lesson too. The memory came without warning, triggered by the scent of wood smoke from Sam's evening fire. December 2019. 3 years before the Christmas that changed everything. Eleanor stood outside the bathroom door of her own house, listening to her children's voices through the polished wood. She's getting worse, Camilla whispered. Did you see her at dinner? She forgot Dad's been dead 2 years. She didn't forget, Jason replied. She's just sad. It's different. Sad doesn't explain the financial decisions. Giving $20,000 to that animal shelter? Writing checks to strangers who call asking for donations? Eleanor's hand hovered over the door handle. She had been reaching for the bathroom light switch when their voices stopped her. Maybe we should talk to someone, Jason said. A lawyer. Find out our options. What kind of options? Competency evaluations. Guardianship. Ways to protect the family assets before she gives it all away to every sob story that calls. Eleanor stepped back from the door. The hallway suddenly felt too small. Too close. The air too thin. You think she's losing her mind? I think she's vulnerable. Rich widows always are. People target them. We need to be proactive. Conservatorship? If necessary. For her own protection. Eleanor walked quietly back to her bedroom. She closed the door and sat on David's side of the bed. The mattress still held the impression of his body, even after 2 years. She pressed her hand into the hollow where he used to sleep. Protection. They wanted to protect the money from her, not protect her from the world. The distinction mattered. Now, sitting on her Montana porch 3 years later, Ellie could finally see the conversation clearly. Not as a mother hearing her children's concern, but as a woman recognizing a business discussion about her expendability. Sam noticed her distant expression. You okay? Just remembering something. From before. Good memory or bad memory? Honest memory. Duke wandered over and rested his head against her knee. His eyes held the same recognition she had seen in her own mirror. The look of someone who had learned that safety was temporary and love was conditional. She scratched behind his ears. We're the lucky ones, aren't we, boy? We got out. The next morning brought visitors. A white SUV with Connecticut plates pulled into her driveway. Ellie watched from the kitchen window as Jason and Camilla climbed out, looking around the ranch like tourists in a foreign country. They had found her. She wasn't surprised. Money left trails, even when you tried to hide them. Her children had always been resourceful when their financial future was threatened. Sam appeared at her elbow. Friends of yours? My children. You want me to handle this? Ellie shook her head. They've come a long way. Least I can do is say hello. But she made no move toward the door. Instead, she watched them approach the house. Jason in his city coat, already shivering in the mountain air. Camilla picking her way carefully across the gravel in shoes designed for sidewalks. They looked smaller here, diminished by the vast sky and honest landscape. Like expensive decorations that had lost their meaning outside the showroom. The knock came soft and uncertain. Nothing like the confident entrance they would have made into her Greenwich home. Ellie waited a full minute before answering. Jason spoke first. Mom, we've been looking for you. I see you found me. Can we come in? We need to talk. Ellie stepped outside instead, closing the door behind her. The morning air bit sharp and clean. We can talk out here. Camilla shivered in her designer coat. Mom, it's freezing. Yes, it is. They stood in awkward silence. Her children, who had once filled every conversation with demands and expectations, seemed at a loss for words. Why did you leave? Jason finally asked. I didn't leave. I relocated. Without telling us. Without discussing it. That's not like you. Ellie studied his face. Still handsome at 42, but stress had drawn new lines around his eyes. The hedge fund must be failing faster than expected. What's not like me, Jason? Making decisions about my own life? Or making decisions without asking your permission? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Camilla stepped forward. Mom, we're worried about you. This ranch, living alone, the dogs. It's not safe for someone your age. Safe. Ellie repeated the word like she was tasting it. Safe from what? From making decisions that aren't in your best interest. From people who might take advantage of you. The irony hung in the air between them. Ellie let it settle before responding. Interesting. Tell me, what would be in my best interest? They exchanged glances. The look of conspirators whose plan was unraveling. Coming home, Jason said finally. Where people who love you can take care of you. People who love me. Ellie nodded slowly. And taking care of me would involve what, exactly? Making sure you're comfortable, safe, that your assets are properly managed. There it was. Assets. The word that always appeared when her children visited. The real reason they had driven 3,000 miles to find her. Duke emerged from the barn and positioned himself between Ellie and her children. Not aggressive, but alert. Ready. I am comfortable, Ellie said quietly. I am safe. And my assets are being managed exactly the way I want them managed. Mom, Camilla's voice cracked slightly. We love you. We just want what's best for you. Then you should be happy. I've never been better. The silence stretched between them like the vast Montana sky. Finally, Jason tried a different approach. The fund is in trouble, Mom. I need your help. At least he was being honest now. What kind of help? A bridge loan. $15 million. Just until the market recovers. Ellie looked at her son. At the desperation carefully hidden behind his confident facade. At the way his hands shook slightly despite the expensive gloves. I don't have $15 million to loan anyone. Of course you do. The house sale alone. The house sale paid for this ranch. The rescue operation. My new life. The money is already committed. Committed to what? Dogs? The dismissal in his voice was sharper than the mountain wind. Ellie felt something inside her chest crystallize into certainty. Committed to things that matter. They argued for another hour. Pleading turned to accusations. Accusations turned to threats of legal action. Through it all, Duke never left her side. Neither did Sam, who had appeared silently on the porch, close enough to help if needed. Finally, as the sun reached noon, her children accepted defeat. They climbed back into their rental SUV, exhausted and empty-handed. This isn't over, Mom, Camilla called through the window. We'll be back. No, Ellie said quietly. You won't. She watched them drive away until the dust settled and the silence returned. Only then did she allow herself to breathe fully. Sam stepped down from the porch. You okay? I'm perfect. And for the first time in years, she meant it. The evidence arrived in a manila envelope 3 weeks later. Ellie recognized the return address Chen and Associates. Michael had promised to send everything once the investigation was complete. She opened it at her kitchen table while Sam fed the dogs their morning meal. The first document was a photocopy of Jason's cell phone records from November 2022. 14 calls to Whitman and Associates, probate law. The same dates appeared in Camilla's phone records. They had been planning this for months. The second document made her stomach tighten. A preliminary psychological evaluation order. Subject Eleanor Vance, DOB 08121951. Concern diminished capacity affecting financial judgment. The petition had been filed but never served. Waiting for the right moment. The third document was a financial analysis of her assets, prepared by Jason's firm. Every account, every investment, every piece of property she owned. Market values updated to the month she disappeared. They had been dividing her estate while she was still alive. Ellie set the papers aside and walked to the window. Outside, Duke was teaching a new arrival, a golden retriever named Honey, how to play again. Patient demonstrations, gentle encouragement, the way healing actually worked. Her phone rang. Michael's number. Did you get the package? I got it. There's more, Eleanor. The psychological evaluation firm they contacted specializes in elderly incapacity cases. Their success rate for establishing guardianship is 93%. Success rate. They know how to present evidence. How to make normal behavior look erratic. Charitable donations become evidence of diminished judgment. Living alone becomes evidence of inability to care for oneself. Ellie sat down hard in her kitchen chair. They would have had me declared incompetent. Within 6 months, maybe less, Jason's hedge fund losses were accelerating. They needed access to your assets quickly. The room felt too small suddenly. Like the walls were closing in. What would have happened to me? Nursing home, probably. Somewhere expensive enough to justify the guardianship fees, but remote enough to limit your contact with the outside world. While they spent my money. Until it was gone. Then you would have become the state's problem. Ellie closed her eyes, saw herself in a sterile room, looking out windows she couldn't open, waiting for visits that never came. While her children lived in her houses and spent her inheritance on themselves. Michael, I want you to do something for me. Name it. I want a complete psychiatric evaluation. Current, comprehensive, the most thorough assessment money can buy. Eleanor, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. I need to prove it to me. 3 days later, drive. Sarah Martinez arrived from Missoula. Board-certified psychiatrist. 30 years of experience with geriatric mental health. She spent 2 full days at the ranch, conducting interviews, cognitive tests, psychological assessments. She observed Ellie with the dogs. Watched her manage the ranch finances. Evaluated her decision-making processes and social interactions. Sam provided character references. The veterinarian testified to her competence in animal care. The report arrived the following week. 12 pages of clinical analysis that concluded with crystal clarity. Subject demonstrates superior cognitive function. Excellent judgment and mental health significantly above average for her age demographic. No evidence of dementia, depression, or impaired decision-making capacity. Subject appears to have made life changes based on rational assessment of her circumstances and priorities. Ellie read the report twice, then filed it in her safe. Insurance policy against future attacks. But the psychological evaluation wasn't the only surprise that week. The second envelope contained Jason's banking records. Michael's investigators had been thorough. The hedge fund was hemorrhaging money faster than Jason had admitted. Client withdrawals, margin calls, bad bets on tech stocks that kept falling. The fund would collapse within 90 days. Jason would face lawsuits, possibly criminal charges for mismanaging client assets. The inheritance he had been counting on wasn't just desired. It was desperately needed. Camilla's situation was equally precarious. Her husband's investment firm was under SEC investigation for securities fraud. Their Hampton house was mortgaged to the maximum. Their children's private school tuition was 3 months behind. They hadn't just wanted her money. They had needed it to survive. The third envelope contained the most damaging evidence. Audio recordings from the probate lawyer's office. Jason and Camilla discussing the conservatorship plan in detail. She'll fight it at first, Camilla's voice came through clearly. But once the evaluation is complete, she'll have no choice. We just need to be patient. How long before we can access the assets? 6 months. Maybe less if we can prove she's a danger to herself. What about the house in Greenwich? First thing to go. Quick sale. The market's still hot for properties in that price range. She'll hate us. She already hates us. At least this way we'll be rich enough not to care. Ellie turned off the recording. Sat in the silence of her kitchen while the Montana wind rattled the windows. Her children's voices echoed in her memory. Cold, calculating, discussing her destruction with the casual efficiency of a business transaction. She walked outside to find Sam repairing a fence post. The physical work helped him think, he had told her. The repetitive motion of hammer against nail. Problem solving that involved his hands instead of his head. Bad news? He asked, noticing her expression. Confirming news. She told him about the recordings. The conservatorship plan. The systematic dismantling of her life that had been scheduled to begin after the holidays. Sam listened without comment until she finished. Then he set down his hammer and looked at her directly. What do you want to do about it? I want to make sure it never happens to anyone else. And your kids? Ellie considered the question. 42 and 39 years old. Old enough to understand consequences. Old enough to accept responsibility for their choices. My kids stopped being my kids the day they decided I was worth more dead than alive. That evening, she called Michael with new instructions. She wanted legal documents prepared. Not defensive measures this time. Offensive ones. What kind of documents? The kind that turn the tables. Eleanor, what are you planning? I'm planning to finish what they started. The Montana sky darkened as storm clouds gathered over the mountains. But for the first time since Christmas Eve, Ellie felt like she could see clearly. Justice, she had learned, wasn't about forgiveness. It was about balance, and the scales had been tilted in her children's favor for far too long. The storm hit Montana 3 days before Easter. Snow fell in sheets that turned the world white and quiet. Ellie watched from her kitchen window as the access road to her ranch disappeared under 2 feet of powder. Perfect timing. Jason and Camilla arrived during the worst of it, their rental SUV sliding sideways into her driveway. They climbed out into the wind, designer coats no match for the mountain weather. City people who had underestimated everything about this place, including her. Ellie let them pound on her door for 5 minutes before answering. When she opened it, they stood shivering on her porch like supplicants. Desperate. Defeated. Exactly where she needed them. We need to talk, Jason said through chattering teeth. About what? About coming home. About family. About fixing this. Ellie stepped aside, but only enough to let them into the mudroom. Not the main house. They weren't guests anymore. They were trespassers who happened to share her DNA. The mudroom smelled of wet dogs and honest work. Camilla wrinkled her nose at the rubber boots and rain slickers hanging on hooks. This wasn't the world she understood, where things were clean and expensive and served her purposes. Mom, Camilla began, we know you're angry. But we're still family. That has to count for something. Family. Ellie repeated the word like it was foreign. Tell me what that means to you. They exchanged glances, the look of conspirators whose script hadn't prepared them for this question. It means looking out for each other, Jason said carefully. Supporting each other through difficult times. Supporting each other. Interesting. Ellie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Michael sent me some interesting documents. Would you like to see them? Their faces went pale. Even in the dim mudroom light, she could see the fear in their eyes. Mom, we can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can. You've always been good with explanations. Like how you explained your absence on Christmas Eve. Rain, wasn't it? Terrible driving conditions. She opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Phone records. 14 calls to a probate lawyer. Same dates for both of you. Quite a coincidence. Camilla stepped backward, bumping into the door. We were worried about you. We wanted legal advice about how to help. Help. Ellie pulled out the second document. A psychological evaluation order. Filed but never served. Were you planning to have me declared incompetent as a surprise? Jason's composure cracked. The lawyer said it was just a precaution. In case your mental state deteriorated. My mental state. Ellie smiled without warmth. Would you like to know about my mental state? She pulled out Drive. Martinez's report. 12 pages of psychiatric evaluation. Current as of last week. Conclusion: superior cognitive function. Excellent judgment. Mental health significantly above average for my age. She watched their hope die in real time. The report destroyed their only legal avenue for challenging her decisions. There's more. Ellie pulled out the financial analysis Jason's firm had prepared. A complete breakdown of my assets. Market values. Liquidation timelines. Very thorough work. Tell me, when exactly were you planning to divide my estate? That's not what that is, Camilla whispered. No? Then what is it? Silence. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the mudroom. Nature providing the perfect soundtrack for their dissolution as a family. Would you like to hear my favorite part? Ellie pulled out the transcript of the recorded conversation. This is you, Camilla, she already hates us. At least this way we'll be rich enough not to care. Camilla's legs gave out. She slid down the door until she was sitting on the mudroom floor, her expensive coat dragging through the slush. And this is you, Jason? How long before we can access the assets? Such a practical question. I admire your business sense. Jason tried one last desperate play. Mom, I know how this looks. But the fund is in real trouble. I could lose everything. Cam's husband is facing federal charges. We need help. You need money. We need family. We need our mother to care about what happens to us. Ellie studied his face. Even now, caught red-handed with evidence of their betrayal, he was trying to manipulate her emotions. 42 years old and still playing the victim card. I do care what happens to you. That's why I'm here instead of the FBI. They both looked up sharply. Yes, Jason. Securities fraud, mismanagement of client funds, the SEC investigation into Camilla's husband's firm. I have all of it. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence that would put you both in federal prison. She let that sink in before continuing. But I'm not turning you over to the authorities. Because despite everything, some small part of me still remembers when you were children who needed protecting. She pulled out one final document. This is a contract. My lawyers call it the Family Restoration Agreement. You're going to sign it. Jason's hands shook as he reached for the papers. What does it say? Terms of engagement for our future relationship. If we have one. She watched him read, saw his face go white as he absorbed each condition. Financial independence clause. I will not pay your debts, cover your losses, or subsidize your lifestyle. You succeed or fail on your own merits. Communication protocol. All contact must be scheduled 2 weeks in advance. No unannounced visits. No emergency financial requests. Grandchildren protection clause. I will pay for Sophie and Marcus's education directly to their schools. You will never have access to or control over these funds. Competency challenge clause. Any attempt to question my mental capacity or file for guardianship will result in the immediate donation of my entire estate to the Montana Wolf Conservation Fund. Jason looked up from the contract. You're cutting us off completely. I'm establishing boundaries, something I should have done years ago. And if we don't sign? Ellie walked to the window and pointed outside. The snow was coming down harder now, making it impossible to see more than 10 feet in any direction. Then you can walk back to town. It's only 12 miles. In this weather, you should make it by morning. Assuming the wolves don't find you first. She wasn't joking. The isolation that had protected her from their greed would now protect her from their guilt trips. Mom, please, sign the contract or leave my property. Those are your options. Camilla struggled to her feet. Mascara had run down her cheeks, leaving black tracks in the mudroom light. You're really going to abandon your own children? I'm not abandoning you, I'm letting you grow up. At your age, it's long overdue. Jason signed first. His signature was barely legible, his hands shaking from cold and fear. Camilla signed next, tears dropping onto the legal paper like rain. There. Ellie took the contract and folded it carefully. Now we understand each other. What happens now? Camilla asked. Now you leave. The storm should pass by morning. The road will be plowed by noon. You can make your flight. And then? Then you live with the consequences of your choices. Just like I'm living with mine. She walked to the door and opened it. Snow blew into the mudroom, mixing with the scent of wet dogs and old leather. Goodbye, Jason. Goodbye, Camilla. Don't come back unless you're invited. They walked into the storm without another word. Ellie watched their SUV disappear into the whiteout, taillights fading until there was nothing left but snow and wind and the vast silence of the mountains. She closed the door and leaned against it. For the first time in years, her house was truly hers. No one had keys who shouldn't. No one had expectations she couldn't meet. No one was planning her funeral while she was still alive. The grandfather clock in her hallway chimed 9 times. But this wasn't the clock from Greenwich. This was a simple wall clock from the hardware store in town. It kept time without ceremony, without judgment, without the weight of tradition that had never served her anyway. Duke wandered over and rested his head against her knee. His eyes held understanding, the look of someone who had survived abandonment and learned to trust again. We're free now, she whispered into his fur. All of us. Outside, the storm continued. But inside her Montana home, everything was finally quiet. Spring came to Montana like a whispered promise. Ellie woke to the sound of snowmelt running in the creek behind her house. April sunshine streamed through windows she had cleaned herself, casting patterns of light across hardwood floors that belonged to no one but her. 6 weeks had passed since the contract signing. 6 weeks of silence from Connecticut. No phone calls, no lawyers, no desperate texts begging for money. Her children had learned the lesson she should have taught them decades ago: boundaries had consequences. Sam knocked on her kitchen door at 7 sharp, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folded newspaper. Their morning routine had evolved without planning. Like most good things in her new life. "Morning, Ellie. How are our guests today?" She smiled at the word choice. Guests. Not burdens or responsibilities or expensive mistakes. The 12 rescue dogs were healing in their own time, at their own pace. No pressure. No timeline. No expectations beyond basic decency. Duke's been sleeping without nightmares for 2 weeks straight. Honey brought me her ball yesterday. First time she's wanted to play. Progress. Sam set her coffee on the table. Slow and steady. The only way that matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the mountains wake up. Pine trees stretched green arms toward the sky. Eagles circled overhead, life continuing at the speed of seasons instead of stock markets. Letters came yesterday, Sam mentioned casually, pulling an envelope from his shirt pocket. Figured you might want privacy to read them. The return addresses made her pause. Sophie and Marcus, her grandchildren, 8 and 6 years old, writing letters in careful pencil script. She opened Sophie's first. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, Mommy said you live with dogs now. I love dogs. Can we visit? Daddy says maybe next year when we're older. I miss you. Love, Sophie. P.S. I'm getting better at piano." Marcus had drawn a picture instead of writing. A house with mountains behind it. Stick figures of a woman and lots of dogs. At the bottom, in shaky letters, Grandma's happy place. Ellie's throat tightened. These children hadn't asked for their parents' greed. Hadn't chosen to be weapons in a financial war. They were casualties of decisions made by adults who should have known better. "Good news?" Sam asked gently. "Reminder news. About what matters?" She carried the letters to her desk and pulled out writing paper. Real stationery, not email. Children deserved the weight of ink on paper. The time it took to choose each word carefully. "Dear Sophie," she wrote. "I do live with dogs now. 12 of them. They are all rescues who needed a safe place to heal. Like all of us, sometimes. You are welcome to visit whenever your parents agree to bring you. I would love to hear you play piano. I miss you too. Love, Grandma Eleanor." To Marcus, she wrote, "Your picture made me smile. Yes, this is my happy place. The mountains are very tall and the dogs are very friendly. I hope you can meet them someday. Thank you for remembering me. Love, Grandma Eleanor." She addressed the envelopes to her children's house. Let Jason and Camilla decide whether to deliver them. One more test of their character. One more chance to choose their children's happiness over their own resentment. The afternoon brought visitors. Dr. Martinez returning for a follow-up evaluation. Not because anyone had questioned Ellie's competence, but because she had requested it. Self-awareness was a muscle that needed exercise. "How are you sleeping?" "Better than I have in years." "Dreams? Nightmares?" "Dreams about the dogs mostly. Sometimes about the mountains. Sometimes about my husband, but happy memories now. Not regrets." "Any contact with your children?" "They signed a contract establishing boundaries. We're all learning to live within them." Dr. Martinez made notes. Asked more questions. Observed Ellie's interactions with Sam and the dogs. Professional curiosity mixed with genuine care. "Your stress levels have decreased significantly since our last meeting," she concluded. "Blood pressure normal. Sleep patterns healthy. Cognitive function unchanged, which is to say excellent. What about my decision-making? Am I crazy for cutting off my own children?" Dr. Martinez smiled. "Eleanor, the definition of sanity is not allowing toxic people to determine your happiness. Even when those people share your DNA." That evening, Ellie sat on her front porch with a glass of wine. Not the expensive Bordeaux from her Greenwich days, but a local vintage that tasted like the soil it came from. Honest, unpretentious, real. Duke and Honey lay at her feet, finally comfortable enough to relax completely. Trust earned through consistency. Love demonstrated through actions instead of words. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Mrs. Vance? This is Sophie. I borrowed Mom's phone. Did you get my letter? Ellie smiled and typed back, I did, sweetheart. I wrote you one too. Ask your mom if she received it. A pause. Then, she did. She's thinking about it. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Colors that existed without purpose except beauty. Like this life she had built from scratch at 72. Sam emerged from the barn, finished with evening chores. He joined her on the porch steps, close enough for conversation but far enough to respect her space. Regrets? He asked, the same question he had posed months ago. This time, Ellie didn't hesitate. Only one. What's that? I regret not trusting myself sooner. I spent 40 years asking permission to live my own life. And now? Now I'm finally home. A coyote howled somewhere in the valley below. The dogs lifted their heads but didn't bark. They had learned the difference between real danger and distant sounds. Between threats that required action and noises that were simply part of the world. Ellie had learned that distinction too. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. Mom says we can visit this summer. If you want us to. Ellie's heart lifted. I want you to. Very much. Will the dogs like us? The dogs will love you. Just like I do. She set the phone aside and looked at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. More stars than she had ever seen from Greenwich. Brighter, clearer, unobscured by city lights and false expectations. Life had taught her many things in 72 years. Tonight, it taught her one more. Sometimes the best inheritance you can leave your children isn't money. It's the example of a person who chose happiness over obligation. Who valued peace more than possession. Who learned that love without respect was just manipulation with better marketing. The mountains stood silent around her ranch, ancient and patient. They had watched thousands of sunsets. Thousands of storms. Thousands of people learning how to let go of things that never served them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Bills to pay, dogs to feed, fences to mend. But tonight, sitting on her own porch in her own time, Ellie finally understood what freedom felt like. It felt like coming home to yourself. Life doesn't end just because it breaks once. What falls apart can be the very place where we learn to stand again. If this story gave even a small moment of strength to someone out there, then everything I went through means something today. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to find everything we actually needed. Sometimes the people who love us have to let us fall so we can learn to fly. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and share a piece of your own story in the comments below. Your words might become the seed of the next chapter we create together. Thank you for spending this time.